Good evening and welcome to Elijah Call. My name is Sunny Garrett and I'm going to be your host tonight. One thing we talk about is deliverance on this show quite a bit, and it's just a great thing that God is doing across our nation. And today I'm super excited to have with me my friend Veronica, who is going to share with us her story of deliverance and so many things that God has brought her through. And it's just amazing to be able to get to know her and talk to her. And Veronica, your story starts early on. You know, you kind of got bound up and tied up by, so many things from such an early age. So tell us about, how does your story start?
Well, it started when I was very young. As far back as I can remember, I was 6 years old. Between the ages of 6 and 12, I was bounced around from house to house. I really didn't stay with my parents. I was at my aunt's house, and when I wasn't with that aunt, I was with another aunt or my mom's second cousins. But I didn't mind, because during that time, I had been sexually abused and raped from two uncles that would come over to my parents' house. So I didn't want to be there.
Right.
It didn't bother me to be bounced around, but yet I still couldn't figure out why am I the one not wanted at home? Why are my other siblings? Right. But at the same time, I was okay with not being there.
Right.
And so through my childhood, it was just basically all over the place. And at age 12, I had to my aunt had passed. So then I was put in a situation to live at my parents' home. And that's when I come to know God for the very first time. I was going with the neighbors across the street to Church of God. And it was kind of neat, because when I had moved in there, I started going to church and getting on the bus and going to Vacation Bible School. And then before you know it, my parents were in church,
Wow.
And that's when they had gotten saved.
Wow.
And that lasted for a while.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so God used you to get them active in church and start to know a little bit more about Him. But then, you said that lasted for a little while.
Yes.
And sometimes in life we get disappointed and things kind of fall through. And talk about, you ended up pregnant when you were 15 years old.
Yes. I was 15 years old. Between the age of 12 and 13, I think I had maybe a year in between there where I had a break from the abuse. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to get out of the house, away from being abused. So the first thing I did was hurry up and find somebody, because everybody said, oh, well, get pregnant and you'll be able to leave, and get pregnant and you'll be able to get married. So right away I got pregnant, and then I found myself getting emancipated from the courts so that I could move out of the house. The last time that I was sexually abused, I was raped when my son was 6 weeks old, and on top of my chest, and that's when I decided I have to get out of here.
Right.
Not only for me, but for my son.
Right. So God can use the worst parts, the darkest moments in our lives to draw us closer to Him. And that's something in reading over your testimony that I saw so many times was, how God would come to you in those darkest moments. And you ended up getting married very young. How did that turn out?
Well, I got married very young, and it didn't turn out. He was a Christian. He had made several albums for the faith-based community, and I thought, here's my answer, he's the key. And I was just too young to be a wife, let alone a mother, and that didn't work out. And when that fell through, I had hit bottom. Then I had tried to commit suicide By this time, I was 19 with 3 children, and I couldn't take care of them. I was still a child myself. I never
Right.
really truly became an adult. My focus was always to get away from the abuse.
Right.
And I never healed and never recovered from the abuse. And all those years that I had asked for help, nobody would give me help. And to that day when I had decided I just can't do this anymore and tried to commit suicide, God had intervened, and I was found. I wasn't breathing through carbon
Right.
monoxide, but he intervened, kept me going, and then I returned to my parents' house, and it was the same feelings, except this time now I had 3 children, and I had no clue what I was doing.
Right. So through all that, it shows someone very vulnerable, just searching, searching for the love that you needed. And, you make mention several times of coming back to God, and starting to search in the right places, but Satan has a way of pulling us away. And it kind of developed that way throughout your testimony.
Yes.
You're searching and you're trying to get to that right source of the right kind of love that you need, and then you're being pulled away, and it's just kind of a back and forth, and so you're at that point, you're a mother, very young, 3 children, and you don't know what to do. You're kind of just at a point where your strength is gone, basically.
Yes.
And your kids went to live with your mother, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And tell me what happened, after that. You've talked to me personally about, searching for that acceptance from your mother, how that was something that, was a struggle for you.
Every time I would hit a bottom, is what I would call it, and it took years to discover that I just wanted my mom to nurture me, love me, want
Right.
me, and everywhere I searched, I was not going to get that. And every time I would end up back at their house, I would think, okay, they're Christians, they go to church, this time it's going to work. They're going to love me this time because, look, they've been going to church longer, so they're going to love me. And then when I had moved back in with them, it didn't happen that way.
Right.
Again, Satan jumped back in when I started going back to church, and the attacks started. And at that point, I had signed over custody of my children because I knew I couldn't do it, and I loved them enough to
Right.
give them the life that they needed that I couldn't give them at that time. I started hanging out with gang members. I ended up marrying one of Chicago's largest gang leaders.
Wow.
And when I married him, I started down a path of drugs, alcohol, lots of drugs. And God intervened each time. I mean, he didn't leave me in addiction long, but long enough to know and understand what addiction was. First
Right.
it was cocaine, and God intervened after six months there, and I was put in jail, and I was facing 6 to 30 years in prison.
Wow.
Well, God intervened there, and the husband had come forward and said, no, it was me that she was driving around, and I was dealing the
Wow.
drugs. But through that time, I had seen so much, just as any typical gang member would see. I had seen as a young girl, or a young lady now. I mean, I was in the car with drive-by shootings, I was in the car with drug deals, I was in the car when some serious stuff really happened. And God intervened there, and jail saved my life. Once I just praise God that I was thrown in jail,
Right.
and that I wasn't given 6 to 30 years, and I
Right.
was given the opportunity to get out.
He has this amazing way of, using things that the world views as bad. You said you went to jail, and that's kind of what got you your focus shift back towards him.
Yes.
You know, and so you talk about being sent to jail, and in this world that's, you know, not a good thing, but even before we're asking for it, he's still keeping us. You know, he's still protecting us and trying to preserve us for later works that he knows he's going to do in our lives. And it's just amazing to think that, you know, through all of that searching, through all the wrong places, you know, he was still in control of the circumstances that were going on. Maybe you hadn't surrendered control yet, but he was still in control of the things that were taking place. And like you said, you know, you got put in jail, which, you know, kind of was your saving grace at that time, in your relationship with him and in your walk with him. But you got preserved from that. You didn't end up in prison, you know. So he knows. It's just amazing to note, you know, that he knows what he's doing, even when we feel like we're at our lowest points. Like, he's in control, and he knows what he's doing. He knows how he's going to use it. Now, something else happened. You were talking about the drug use, and where did that lead you?
I guess I didn't learn my lesson. Like you said, I wasn't ready to surrender. So I had gotten out, and through this whole process, I mean, I was looking for that love and nurturing in all the wrong places.
Right.
And I had married one husband 3 times. And that was the start of this big roller coaster.
Right.
He was wanted by the police, and so my first instinct is, let's go across the state, let's get out of here, and here's me. Okay, well, no one wants me here anyway. So jumped in the car, we end up in Arizona, and right away jump into the world of meth. And I can't say that I had an addiction, but I know how powerful it is, only because we had used it 8 days straight, and after that, it was God intervened again. My parents had heard me on the phone. They knew something wasn't right.
Right.
And they had called and told the police where he was. Of course, then I got arrested again for aiding and abetting, but that was enough to get me back to the States to my parents. But just after 9 days use of crystal meth, I spent 13 months in a mental health facility.
Wow.
Because they had actually thought that I was schizophrenic, and it was actually damage that was caused from the extreme use and no sleep, and the continual use for 9 straight days.
Right, right. It's so awesome how God, you know, like I said, he'll use anything that he can. Now, you had talked about going to Mexico, and I know that was a really hard time for you there.
I wanted to get away from that husband. This is in between when I had married him, and I met some what I thought was really good friends, you know, and that was the story of my life. These are good people. And I met them, and next thing you know, now I'm at the point where, okay, I have a relationship with God, I'm doing well. And at that point, I ended up in Mexico, and they were running the drug cartel. So this time I'm not doing drugs. This time they're like, well, you can make good money. All you have to do is take the money across the border. So I was there for 2 years. My family still doesn't know this day why I was in Mexico, but I was actually trapped inside the cartel and didn't know it when I was going in because they were so nice to me. And during that time I ended up being raped again. And it was in a hotel room, and it was by more than one person. And I had called home with such a broken heart and with such pain. And my son is the one who reached out to me, and I returned home immediately.
Right. So, you know, in all of that, you know, in the, you know, the gangs, and you said you thought these are good people, you know. It was all in search of that acceptance, you know, that you had talked about earlier, right? Like you had been searching and looking just for somebody to accept you, to love
Yes.
you, you know, that kind of family bond that you didn't have, you know,
Yes.
as a child. And obviously it all led you down a terribly wrong path. And then you said that you had gotten a phone call from your son, and he had called you, and is it correct that you went to visit him for a birthday? And that kind of, or he had given you had called him, and it had opened your eyes to a relationship with Christ.
Yes. I
Okay.
returned back to the States,
Okay.
and I moved back in with my mom's. And at this point, things were going good. I was back in church, got a job, started going to training in school through the medical field, started my own home health care for hospice.
Right.
Had a good relationship with my son during that time.
Okay. And you know, you seemingly had your life back on track, right? And you,
Yeah, and the devil don't like that.
of
Because
course
right
not.
away,
Of course not.
There were several, I can't even count how many times there's been suicide attempts and attempts where I've lost track of how many times I've been on life support.
Mm-hmm.
Because every time I would take a step forward, the best way to explain is I'd feel like I'm climbing out of a hole, and every time I'd get to the ledge, somebody would step on my fingers and knock me back down. And in my heart and in my mind, I knew that God was trying to pull me up, but I still wasn't ready to surrender yet. So Satan was the one kicking me back down farther
Right.
and farther.
And I think you said it perfectly when you said, you know, you weren't ready to surrender yet. Because I feel like, you know, in anybody's walk, until you're ready to wholeheartedly, you know, give your life up to Him, you're going to be susceptible to those temptations, to those things that draw you back. And you said, you know, you take a step forward, and He knocks you back a couple of steps, you know, and that's kind of where you were, was the back and forth. And it's so important. I feel like it's so important to note that, you know, it's not always, it's not going to be easy. You know, there's so many obstacles and trying to serve God and trying to live your life for Him. You know, some people go into it thinking that it's going to be an easy walk, and it's not an easy walk, and it takes perseverance and willingness to surrender, you know, which is what you were just talking about, is just your willingness to give it all up to Him and to let Him use that. And I think sometimes it's really hard for us to feel vulnerable. It's hard for us to feel that, you know, letting go of things makes us feel like we're susceptible to being hurt again. And that's just a really hard step to take, and I think it's harder for some people than others. And talk about, you know, you've been clean for how long now?
23 years in October.
23 years in October. So amazing. And since you've been clean, God's been using you in some really awesome ways. Just, you know, talk a little bit about how what you went through back then is helping you minister now.
Well, I mean, I am able to help young girls. In Illinois, before I moved to Ohio, I was working with a program to help young girls that were getting involved in gangs. So I'd go out to different school events and I would speak on that. I've worked with different domestic abuse shelters and rape crisis centers. I'm on a couple boards in the state of Ohio for women that have been abused, and it's been a blessing to be able to show them that you can recover, you can bounce back, and you can let go, surrender, and receive that mercy and grace through my relationship with Christ.
Right. And, you know, you, in our conversations that we've had, you know, you've had mothers of people who are in gangs, you know, tell them, you need to talk to this woman, you know, you need to talk to this woman who can help you. And the way you put it to me when we were talking was, no, I can't help, but I know who can. And it's such an amazing thing to watch. We have a God who doesn't waste. He doesn't waste anything. The darkest, hardest moments of our lives, he'll use them. That's what the Bible says. He's going to turn it around and use it for the good of those who love him. And just talk a little bit about how you've been able to reach people, that I would never dream of being able to reach, that some other people would never be able to reach,
Well, I don't know. God just puts them in my path. I mean, I could be at the grocery store in the line. I could be at a function for one of my grandkids.
Right.
I could be, I do support groups, so I've reached a lot of mothers, children, people facing addiction, people in gangs.
Right.
It's more common for me to run into people that are in gangs in Chicago or Columbus than it is here in Cleveland, but I have been as far as Columbus, and I'm from
Right.
Chicago. I've had quite a few drug dealers come across, and I've helped them to see what they've done and
Right.
what they are doing now. I mean, it's just amazing where God has
Right.
led me.
And more importantly, I think, or, equally as importantly, I should say, is, to see somebody with your testimony and to see somebody who's been involved with the things you've been involved with and come out of them. There's hope. That offers hope to people who are in the middle of that now, and who are struggling now and in a life that maybe they feel like has consumed them. Maybe you're dealing with a lot of the same things that Veronica's dealt with, with the drugs and the gangs and the searching for acceptance and love. And you offer the proof that there's hope through Christ. There's hope through, his grace and his love that you don't find anywhere else. And there's just, there's something to be said about again, that he doesn't waste things, and that he's, uses the darkest parts of our lives to touch others that others aren't going to be able to touch, And you said you're, now working with support groups and offering helps to people all over the place, really. I mean, you're all over the place, just spreading that hope to people.
Well, usually when things like this happen, you hear about it happening to one person. And I have a friend that she's a minister, and we've been friends for 7 years. And she's like, I've been in your life 7 years, and you just can't make this stuff up.
Right.
She says, I've seen you go through this. She's heard my testimony, and when I have been to other churches sharing it, I mean, I've been through the abandonment as a child. I've been through the molestation, the rape. I've been through the rejection, looking for love in the wrong places, domestic violence, hit by a car, and lived through that. Just so many things that have happened in just my short life.
Right.
And I have to say that God has intervened in each time to save me from that, and I believe that he intervened each time so that I may be used to minister and help those that are going through what I'm going through or what I have went through. And it's a comfort to people to know. And I'm especially, I praise God for the mercy and the grace, because God was able to, even though we can talk about all this and it's on paper and people can see it in black and white and we're able to talk about it, but he's putting blinders on me to where I remember the events, but he has given me the grace that I don't remember the pain of each actual event.
Right.
So I remember, and I remember how I got to each place, and I remember everything that happened, but I don't mentally remember the event itself, if that makes sense.
Well, he doesn't give us more than we can handle.
Amen.
And I think, he takes your story and it kind of, I think it eases the pain and it makes it a little easier when you know that there's purpose behind it, and he's put so much purpose behind the things that you've gone through, the things that you've struggled with. And he's using you in capacities that you would never be able to be used if you hadn't gone through those things. And I think that kind of alleviates, the hard part of it when you know that it can be used. If you had, just a quick minute to say one last thing to anybody, if you're watching this show and somebody out there is going through or has gone through the same things that you've gone through, and you had one last thing that you could speak to them, what would that be?
I would say there is hope. There is someone out there. Reach out. Find that hope through Christ. Some people, I'm stubborn. I wouldn't give in and surrender to the Lord. And he's intervened each time, and he can intervene for you. And I encourage you to reach out. Reach out to me. Reach out to the church. Reach out to God. The only way that I could have made this through all of this is through my surrender, my final surrender to the Lord, to come in and allow me to minister and help other people, right, and form this circle of help. Right. These arms that there was never any arms to wrap around me, and the Lord has reached down, wrapped them around me, and now I'm reaching to wrap them around others.
Right. So there's help out there. There's hope, through Jesus Christ and his sacrifice that he gave for us. And, that's where the search can end is, when you accept him and you make yourself open to his love. That's the hope that Veronica found. That's the hope, that's a lasting hope. It doesn't go away. He doesn't leave us. So I encourage you, we're going to put, Veronica has a helpline, and we're going to put her email at the bottom of the screen. And if something that she's spoken about, and if she's talked about something and you want to find that hope that she found, you want to find that peace that she found, I encourage you to get a hold of her at that email address. If you've watched this show and it's touched you, we want to hear your feedback. We have an Elijah Call Facebook page. Get a hold of us there. Shoot us a message. Let us know that this program reached you, that you were touched by this program today. And I encourage you to tune in next time. Veronica, I think we're going to have a second show. Her story goes on, and it's going to be exciting to hear. So I encourage you to tune in again. Right here on MCTV at 10:30 p.m. on Sunday nights, and we look forward to having you back. Thank you.